talk about the Bill of Rights. There's a couple of things that are interesting to know about the Bill of Rights. Number one, the Bill of Rights was never intended to be a listing of your rights. Some people think that. That's where we get our rights from. No, it wasn't even intended to be a listing. You have a lot more rights than are what listed there. It was only intended to be a prohibition on the federal government with respect to a few of your rights. Okay? That's number one. Number two, the founders never intended for the federal government to be a watchdog over the states. Remember this? Remember this concept? This is what? This is ruler's law. If the state does something a little wrong, the federal government is to pounce on them? That's ruler's law. No, this is the way problems are to be solved. The only thing that holds, right? When the people say, we're solving this problem. This is people's law, okay? So it was never intended for the federal government. I'll show you how that changed. So let's talk about the First Amendment. On page 45, middle of the page. First Amendment begins with these words: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Well, I want you to go over to the next page, number 2. The founders had already declared in the Northwest Ordinance that religion should be taught in the schools. Now wait a minute. You got the founders saying teach religion in the schools, and then you got the First Amendment saying Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Are they not contradictory? And the founders would say, oh no. No, we want religion taught in the schools. What's the first question? First question. Say teach religion in the schools, what would be the first question? Whose religion? Right? That's a fair question. Whose religion? And one of the founders said, well, the universal religion, of course. Another one said, the religion of all mankind. Another one said, the general principles that unite us all. And you say, what in the world are they talking about? And it was Ben Franklin who, in one paragraph, right here in the middle of the page, kind of identified that. He said, here is my creed. I believe in one God, the creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is in doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this. These I take to be the fundamental points of all sound religion. In other words, these are the golden threads that run through all, as he said, sound religion. Well, let's see if we can identify them. Letter A, there is a creator. There is a creator. Letter B, the Creator has revealed a moral code to help us know right from wrong. Letter C, the Creator holds us responsible for the way we treat each other. Letter E, that all mankind live beyond this life. There is a next life. Letter E, that in the next life, individuals are judged by their Creator for their conduct in this. Do you see all those in Ben Franklin's quote? These, the founders said, are the things that every generation needs to be taught. At home, at church definitely, and even in the schools. Because, as we established this morning, as I showed you quotes this morning, the founders said, you cannot have freedom and maintain freedom without a virtuous and morally stable people, and it's religion that helps you do that. And the First Amendment, as originally written, does not prohibit that in the least. All it says, Congress shall keep its hands out of any subject of religion. Do we all understand that?
Amen.
This was so sacred that they didn't want the federal government involving themselves in any way about it. These are all, if you have to have regulation on any religion, let it be local, let it be state. And you might have to have that. I mean, you can't commit a crime and say, well, it's my religion, my freedom of religion. No, I'm sorry. Everybody follow Second, letter B, down at the bottom of 46, the second provision of the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Well, do you ever have to have laws concerning speech and press? Maybe yes, but not on the federal level. Any law, for example, can you run into a crowded theater and yell fire, and after a dozen people are trampled to death, well, I have freedom of speech. Or write something scurrilous in the newspaper, and after some innocent person's reputation is besmirched, say, well, I have freedom of the press, you know. I'm sorry. Any regulation of those things, religion, press, speech, and those other things, must be local or state. You keep it close to the people because these things are so sensitive issues. You don't want the federal government involved in this. I'll show you how that changed when we get to the 14th Amendment. We need to talk about the Second Amendment with this group. Okay. Well, let's just go on. Let's go to the Ninth Amendment on page 48. Ninth Amendment. Bottom of 48. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What in the world is that there for? All this is saying is, hey folks, we've listed a few of our rights. Don't think that's all of them. See, if you don't have that kind of a disclaimer at the end of the list, it might be assumed by some judge that that's all you have. Just want to let you know we got plenty more. So I would tell you. That's the Ninth Amendment. And then the famous 10th Amendment, which says, on the next page, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. I'm going to stop there and say, okay, how many powers are delegated to the United States by the Constitution? And you would all say 20, 6, and 11. Those powers. So, the powers not delegated, in other words, everything else, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. I don't know how you could say it any simpler than that. Do you? That's pretty clear. President Reagan used to say that's the most violated part of the whole document. That's probably true. All right. Go to the 12th Amendment, if you would. That's right there on the same page, page 49, 12th Amendment. Did you know that in the first few elections for president, the electors voted for two people from one list, and the highest vote getter was president, and the second highest vote getter was vice president? Do you see a problem with it? Well, what's the problem? Yeah. Your vice president may be your mortal enemy, right? I heard Dr. Skousen say one time, you may need a food taster if you're president. So to correct that little weakness, the 12th Amendment was passed, which required separate ballots for president and vice president. So hopefully your vice president will be your friend, okay? That's the 12th Amendment. Now I want you to look at the year the 12th Amendment was passed. See that year? 1804? Look at the year the next amendment was passed and tell me how many years we went without an amendment.
61.
Over 60 years. May I be so bold as to say, I believe, as I've studied this, if the founders' wisdom had been followed, we probably wouldn't have needed many more amendments after the 12. Certainly wouldn't have needed the next 3. Those are Civil War amendments. We wouldn't have had a Civil War. Isn't that amazing? But we didn't, so we do. Of course, the 13th got rid of slavery. Now let's talk about the 14th Amendment. Do you remember me telling you that the founders did not intend the federal government to be a watchdog over the states? Think of that as I read letter B. This is a paragraph from the 14th Amendment. no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person the equal protection of the law. Okay, you put that incredibly general mandate in a federal document. What have you just created here? You have created an awesome watchdog by the federal government over the states. And with subsequent Supreme Court decisions, this thing has turned itself on its head, where almost anyone who claims to be violated in almost any civil right can now go straight to federal court, to the federal government. You see this, folks? Because it's all part of federal law now. It is this provision, the next sentence says, that has been used from 1925 in the Gitlow case to the present to transfer a huge workload of cases to the federal courts. What was the Gitlow case? Well, by the way, 1925, this is 50 years after the 14th Amendment was passed, right? The Gitlow case said all of the prohibitions in the Bill of Rights against Congress now apply to every level of government. So it's like saying, instead of Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, now it says Congress, the states, the counties, the cities, the school districts, any level of government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Do you see what change this had? All of a sudden, all levels of government units came under this incredible prohibition. So, your community that for years had been putting the nativity scene out on front of the municipal building at Christmas time can't do that anymore. Why? Because you're going to get sued for violating somebody's First Amendment rights. Wait a minute, First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. The Gitlow case, Congress, the cities, the states shall make no law. You are establishing a religion by doing that, and you cannot do it because of First Amendment. Do you see this, folks? This is such a complete distortion of this First Amendment. Guy wants to open a porn shop downtown in your town. So you can't do that. What do you mean? I got my First Amendment rights. Congress shall make, and the city shall make no law prohibiting, speech and press, which is involved in pornography. Incredible. It has, in subsequent court cases, based on this, has restricted the ability of states, schools, communities from really having their own standards in their own communities. Schools supposedly can't even call it Christmas break anymore. Yeah, winter break. They want to establish a religion. Do we see this, folks? It's amazing what's happened. Not necessarily because of the 14th Amendment, but because of subsequent interpretations of a very broad statement in the 14th Amendment. And they continue to do that. Amazing. Look at letter A. This amendment provides that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are automatically citizens. And of course, when this amendment was passed, this is after the Civil War, this was made because there were some states, admittedly, that had a difficult time giving former slaves their full civil rights. No question about it. And this was saying that former slaves who are subject to the jurisdiction, in other words, they're living here in the United States, they've lived here for generations, they're subject to this jurisdiction, they're subject to no other jurisdiction, they are citizens. Well, this has been so twisted. This never was intended to apply to, for example, a diplomat who is here on assignment and happens to have a child while they're living in the United States. It was never intended to make that person a citizen, nor was it ever intended to apply to women who come over from Mexico into my state or any other state and have a child, and all of a sudden the Supreme Court says that child's a citizen. Because there was no subjection to the jurisdiction thereof of the parent. This is incredible. So anyway, it goes on. 14th Amendment. Now we have two other amendments we're going to talk about. Of course, the 15th right to vote. 16th Amendment has the most interesting history, so let's talk about it for a minute. Did you get that word history there? Letter A, income taxes are assessed directly against the individual and therefore constitute a direct tax. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, I didn't show you this, probably should have. Let me just pause here and say, I told you at the very beginning that how the founders felt about income taxes, a tax like income taxes, and warned us against it. And even put in the Constitution a prohibition against it. Well, that was in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, which says, if the federal government ever has to levy a tax on the people, let it be done on one basis only, and that is by population, by enumeration, in other words, by counting people. Which means, on no other basis can they do it. Not on income, not on wealth, not on inheritance, no other basis. That was then is in the Constitution. Do we all understand that? Can somebody tell me how the federal government was financed mostly during the first 100 years? Tariffs on imports, right? And the tariffs on the imports in most time paid for the functions of the federal government, including the military. I want to say that if the federal government were kept within its proper constitutional bounds, we could still fund the correct functions of the federal government by tariffs on imports. They did not anticipate in regular times the federal government turning inward to the people for support. Isn't that interesting? Because the federal government's job mostly was to deal with foreign nations. Then let that commerce pay for the federal government. But they said, they talked about this. They said, but there may be a time when that isn't sufficient. Can you think of something? Like in a war, when you don't have what? A lot of imports. And you need what? Money. So they said in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4, if the federal government ever has to turn inward to the people for support, let it be done only by enumeration, not by any other means. All right, so how many millions of people do you have in your state? Round it off to the nearest million. 6 million? Okay. So let's say we get into an emergency. Okay. And the federal government says, okay, Missouri, your assessment is $60 million. $60 million. We've got to have this quick. All right, divided by 6, that's $10 a head, right? Does it get into your pocketbook, into your private affairs, into your bank account, make your employer say how much money? No. It's a direct tax, but it's only on counting people. That's the only way, constitutionally, originally, that the federal government can tax inward on the people. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4. And that's the reason they had to pass the 16th Amendment to get rid of that, because the Supreme Court kept slapping them down. Let's read it. Letter A, we read that. Letter B, during the Civil War, Congress passed an income tax measure. The Supreme Court warped its legal vision sufficiently to call it an indirect tax, so it could be used to finance the war. Letter C, this is 30 years later now, the Supreme Court reversed itself and ruled that a federal income tax is a direct tax after all, and is therefore unconstitutional. All right, so we're back on track now, right? It's unconstitutional. Letter D, by 1906, the demands for redistribution of wealth through a federal income tax was growing in the liberal wings of both the Democrats and the Republicans. The idea was to soak the rich. All right, this is the progressive era, right? Remember this? And we got to know what was happening during this time. We'd been through the Industrial Revolution. There were a number of people that were becoming quite wealthy. And there were people who still envied the wealth of the wealthy. And even at this early time, fundamental principles of this great document cease to be taught in many places. And that provides a very fertile field for new ideas. New ideas like, hey, we're stuck here in this factory slaving an old moneybags who owns this place. He's out on the golf course. Let him pay for this and this and that. You see how that can get going? That can be pretty attractive unless you understand equal protection of property. And that just kept going. It became such an issue that even wealthy people in both parties didn't want to openly be against soaking the rich because it would make them lose support for their party. Do you see the problem? All right, let's keep going. Letter E. In 1909, Senator Bailey, a Democrat from Texas, introduced an amendment to a tariff bill that would tax all incomes of $5,000 or more at 2%. 2%. This amendment was introduced to embarrass the Republicans by forcing them to openly oppose a measure that seemed to be gaining popularity. Do you see the little tug of war here? What the Democrats are trying to do? Get the Republicans to openly oppose this so we can say, they're not against soaking the rich. Letter F. When it appeared the Bailey motion was actually going to pass, conservative Republicans frantically introduced an income tax bill as an amendment to the Constitution. Who did? Conservative Republicans. Confident that it would be rejected by enough states to defeat it. I ask you folks, is this not cowardly? Yes. You don't want it, but somehow you gotta tell those Democrats where to go. You don't want to do it yourself. So we're going to vote this draconian measure, and we're going to let the states tell where to get off. That was the plan. Letter G. The plan backfired. The Senate approved the income tax amendment 77-0. After all, who wants to be against soaking the rich? Nobody did. None of them did it. And the House approved it 318-14. As one textbook says, contrary to all expectations, the income tax amendment was ratified by one state legislature after another. It was proclaimed in effect February 25th, 1913. Then there was a few who want to make an issue that it wasn't properly ratified, but that doesn't go anywhere. We need to repeal the thing. We need to get back to original thinking here of the founders. Anyway, that's the history of that. Letter H, Congressman Payne of New York, who had introduced the bill in the House for the Republicans, admitted they were simply trying to defeat the Bailey bill and did not really want an income tax. He said that an income tax is one that makes a nation of liars. Filling out your 1040, right? Okay, that's what he said. Letter I, income tax rates have now risen. Your book says 10 times. You can put in whatever you want there. Okay. All right, I want to conclude here by the 17th Amendment, and then we're going to talk a little bit. 17th Amendment is an amendment that most Americans have no idea the damage. So let's talk about it. Letter A, Washington was one of the foremost proponents of a Senate with members appointed by the state legislatures. Letter B, when Jefferson returned from France, he expressed concern as to the purpose of the Senate and why it was not elected by the people. Even the great Jefferson didn't understand this incredible provision of the Senate. He was a great populist. He thought that all should be popularly elected. Washington asked him why he poured his hot drink into his saucer before drinking it. And Jefferson replied, to cool it. And that, Washington commented, is what the Senate is for, to cool down any hot-headed or imprudent legislation coming out of the House. Now let's talk about this for a minute. What is there about the House that would tend to engender imprudent legislation? What is there? Tell me. First of all, they're elected directly by the people, right? And what would be the temptation of a congressman coming back for re-election to say, what? Look what I've done for you.
Yeah.
Look at all this Washington money I've got coming down into our district for schools, for hospitals, or whatever. I mean, we got this bridge going here. Re-elect me so I can go back and keep it coming. See this temptation? Because that's who they have to appeal to be re-elected. Well, in building this bridge from Washington to the people, who's left out? What level of government? The states. That should have most government say, or most governments should be. You build this bridge so heavily from Washington to the people, the states are out. Did you know that the founders actually thought about that? It's incredible to me they thought of so many little details, and this is the one they thought about. There's a great quote in Discussion in the Making of America about this case. And Madison says, I think we need to give the states protection against the incredible power that is built by a direct bridge from Washington to the people. And how do you do that? You give the Senate to the states. And you say, okay, who would know more about when states' rights are being violated? The people? No, they wouldn't know, really. Some of them would, but most of them wouldn't. Who would know most of that? State legislators. And it's kind of interesting. You talk to a lot of state legislators today. Doesn't matter what party, Democrats or Republicans. They feel the weight of the federal government. They feel that. And so they said, we will have state legislatures send the senators to the Senate to protect states' rights. And so when the bill comes over, one of these hot-headed or imprudent legislative bills come over from the House to keep the bridge going, right? The Senate would say, no, this violates states' rights. It leaves the states out. We won't have that. And because every piece of legislation needs to pass both houses, we won't have that and not pass it. Do you see this, folks? This is incredible protection of states' rights, where the states have powerful input into the machinery of the federal government. Well, what happened? Well, there's several stories that surround how this got going, but one of them is there was some unwise going on in one state legislature where one member of the state legislature was basically bribing other members of the state legislature to vote for him for U.S. Senate. Well, when that hit the fan, oh my goodness. Bribery in the state capitol. Trying to elect a U.S. Senator. And remember, this is the progressive era. This is the era of change and new ideas. So the progressives pick up on this. This is an incredible opportunity to change one of the most basic structures of the federal system. And that thing became a big thing in the media, and the states first resisted it, but the pressure became too great. And the states eventually ratified the 17th Amendment. After all, Isn't it more democratic? See, that word started to be used in progressive areas. Isn't it more democratic for the people to elect the senator? You see, if you don't understand these precious concepts of protection of states' rights, you could fall for that. And that's what happened. And the pressure was too great. And the states ratified the 17th Amendment and gave away their trump card into the federal machine. So now, what do senators have to do to get reelected? Look what I'm doing for you. I mean, not all of them, but you know, there's plenty of them around. Look what I'm doing for you. Let's keep this bridge going. Reelect me. Tell you what, I was in Nevada and woo, there's a big battle going on there. But let's keep the bridge going. I've got the power. Send me back. Send me back. It's amazing. And basically, we have two houses of representatives. You know what the states have to do now to get an ear of the federal government? They get together in their governor's conferences or in their state legislative conferences, pass resolutions, and go beg to Washington. This is not America. This is not the founders' formula for protection of local, strong self-government, which is Principle 21 on your card. How easy do you think it'd be to repeal the 17th Amendment? Your congressman introduces a bill next week to repeal the 17th Amendment. What would you see on the front page of the paper? Congressman so-and-so wants to turn the election of your senator back over to those people in Jefferson City and deprive you of your right to vote for senator. Well, you'd never get to first base on that because people don't understand that principle. Any question about that? 17th Amendment. Well, is there one or two questions that's just burning to be asked that I haven't covered? Usually we cover a lot of things, and so questions get answered. Yes, real loud.
Yeah, on the idea that, because we heard a lot that this Constitution is a living document.
Constitution is a living document. What about that? Well, you know, it's kind of interesting that, of course, most of the people who say that are the ones that want to take the wraps off of any constitutional limitation, right? There's a clause, we didn't go over this, there's a clause in Article 1, Section 8, right at the end, called the Necessary and Proper Clause. Sometimes it's referred to as the elastic clause, where, boy, the people who want to put anything into the document, that's one of the places they'll stick it. Well, that's in the elastic clause, where it says Congress can pass any necessary and proper clause, like Constitution here. If you want to turn to it, it's on page 7 of the Pocket Constitution. To make, this is the last clause in Article 1, Section 8, to make all laws which are necessary, which shall be necessary and proper, well, which shall be necessary and proper. That's where they stop. But let's keep going. For carrying into execution the foregoing powers. In other words, for the 20 powers. See, the reason they put that in there is to make it live. And there's a quote in The Making of America that says if that weren't in there, the powers would become dead. What do they mean by that? Well, for example, one of the 20 powers is to create and organize a navy, okay? But as technology improves, and all of a sudden, a number of years later, you got submarines. Well, can we buy submarines for the Navy? Look in the Constitution. It doesn't say submarines. You can't buy them because it doesn't say submarines. Well, this is one example where the necessary and proper clause is necessary so you can carry out the provision to create a Navy. Do we see this, folks? And this applies to a lot of these. To create a monetary system. Okay, the federal government has to pass a law. They did, the Coinage Act of 1792, to create the denominations, to create the details of how we're going to have a monetary system. So you need the necessary and proper clause. That's how you make this Constitution live. You do not say all of a sudden that Congress can do anything it wants to do. We don't need this. This is an archaic document. let's make it live in that respect. There is no need to do that. The Constitution is made to deal with something that has never changed in the history of man. What is that? Human nature. And the tendency of a person, once they get a little authority, to immediately begin to exercise authority over other people that they shouldn't.
But isn't the Supreme Court just as guilty of using quite a bit and interpreting the Constitution as a legal fact?
The Supreme Court is guilty of that, absolutely. That's what they say in there. The raps are off the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's gone through a few phases. They used to use the interpretation of the founders, the Federalist Papers and the notes of the convention and so forth for their direction. They don't do that anymore. And Jefferson warned us about that. He said the time may very well come when the will of the judges become paramount to the words of the original intenders. Oh yeah, Jefferson, he had it right. He says, I fear the germ of dissolution of our republic is in the federal judiciary, working like gravity by day and by night, a little bit here and a little bit there. They will take all power to Washington. Those are his words. Yes, sir.
What were our forefathers' thoughts on term limits?
Term limits? They discussed term limits in the convention, term limits for senators, actually. And they said, in essence, no, term limits creates an artificial system. They said, there were several reasons. They said, what if you want to keep somebody in there, but term limits requires that you can't? See, that really takes away a right of the people to have represent them whom they will, when you think about it, term limits. They said, what if you're in an emergency and you don't want to change somebody, but because of term limits you're required to? It's like changing horses in the middle of the stream. It may not be the best thing. So they rejected term limits. And they said the best term limit is where? The ballot box. Yeah. Folks, let me just talk to you here a little bit. I just so appreciate you coming and spending this day. I know each of you had to give up something to be here. But I hope that you have felt the fire of the Founders' message in your heart today. We do the best we can to deliver it. But it's their message, and it's not me, it's not my message, it's everybody's message. I hope you have felt that today. I think you have. Somebody asked me, how did you get involved in this? And I said, well, I went to a seminar, 1978. And I sent it was in Phoenix at the West Side Baptist Church. I'll never forget it. And I was so taken by this. I said, I'm going to put on a seminar in Mason. So I went back and I organized one. That's what you can do. Everybody needs to be involved in this. There needs to be a lot of teaching going on. So that's what we hope will happen as a result of this seminar. You can have other seminars and invite us to come if we can work it out, but you need to be the teacher. You need to do it. And all this material is made available so you can. Hopefully you don't find it too expensive. So you can learn the formula of the Founders and then teach it. So we can have thousands of people out there teaching the Founders' message. Now let me say this. I know we're in very difficult times. And I don't think it's a secret that we're headed for even more difficult times. Somebody said, do you think we're going to be able to save this thing? And I said, well, not without some pain. I wish we could say it's going to be painless, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think I'm saying anything you don't think. It's going to hurt. And it's going to hurt pretty hard. And it's almost like it has to happen so that when it's over, we can rebuild. And as I tell my students, you need to learn this and work hard to save as much as we can. But the time, I'm sure, will come, and I don't pretend to say when or how, when this whole thing is going to come crashing down. Because it's all a house of cards, you know that. And when it does, and the people who are in power for gain and glory won't be there, because there won't be any gain and glory. There will be people who still say, does anyone know how to put this together again? And to rebuild? And as I asked my students, who will be there? And they all look up at me, well, I guess we will be, Mr. Taylor. And I said, yeah, I think you will be. And I'm taking my vitamins, so I'll see how you do. This is wonderful. As I said this morning, I do not believe, with the founders, I do not believe that America was established and wind up on the ash heap of history. I will not buy that. I have a conviction that it will not. America has got a great destiny, and we have not seen, in my opinion, the greatest destiny for America. We must be that city set on a hill. So we keep working, we keep doing, and I'm just so grateful that you're working. And just a couple of pieces of advice, if you don't mind. Stay in the mainstream of the freedom effort. You know what that means? We all know good people. You work with them, you go to church with them, whatever. Your family with them, you all know good people. Not all about you, but I meet with good people in these places, and I look at them and I say, how can I touch their hearts for freedom? How can I do this? I can tell you one way not to do it, not to tell them some far-out theory about some thing and they think you're crazy. It may be true, but that's not the way to approach people. You got to stay in the mainstream. Have you felt that today? This is positive. This is good. We teach people the correct principles. That's the way we do it. Then we bring them along. And there's a lot of things you can get involved in. And if you do, I wish you well, but I don't recommend it. I asked somebody in Mesa a number of years ago to run for the state legislature. He said, and I thought he could win. He had a great name, well known. He said, Earl, I can't. There was a 10-year period in my life I didn't pay my income taxes. Huh? You know how we feel about income taxes. And if that's what you choose to do, I don't recommend it. I've seen families destroyed. I've seen fortunes destroyed. I don't recommend it. But if that's what you choose, I wish you well. But I don't recommend it. Stay in the mainstream, okay? Then live providently. Get out of debt. Try to become independent as much as you can. I know we're all dependent on each other. There is great freedom in not being in debt. Live providently. Be able to survive without going to the store for a while. You know how fragile food supply is in this country. I hope you know. It's very fragile. And 2 weeks, if stores aren't replenished, they're empty. How are you going to survive? I love the story of Joseph, the Old Testament. Remember what he said? Told the people, hard times are coming. Just put a little food away. Did they? No, he did. So when hard times came, where'd they go? To Joseph. And he said, let's sit down and talk. and you can organize it. Maybe a great bartering chip. So live providently. Be wise. Anyway, I just pray that God's blessings will be with you, because we're on His side, I think. And we've read the last chapter. Right? And in the end, we win. Thank you very much, folks.